Hi, I'm Daniel. I'm a sleep physician, and in this special edition video, I want to share some recent insights that I believe are going to change the trajectory of my life. Maybe they'll change the trajectory of yours too, who knows? What I want to share is the story of what's been happening to my thought processes and my understanding of mental health problems over the past several months, but particularly over the past week, where there's been some dramatic, radical changes in how I understand mental health issues and how we should approach them. And you may be surprised to see where I found the solution. But what I want to share with you first and foremost here is kind of the story of what's been happening over the past maybe year or so. As many of you know, I've become really engaged in the process of helping people that have trouble sleeping. But what I realized pretty early on was that the insights that are so important when it comes to insomnia seem to also apply to other problems, particularly anxiety. I felt that one thing that was really important was how knowing that you can't kind of directly attack insomnia, you can't do anything to make yourself sleep, that just backfires. That also applied to hyperarousal or anxiety. Anything you do with the specific intent and purpose of being less anxious actually produce more of it because you brought more attention to the problem. That was one real interesting insight I had many months ago. Another one was when my wife, Jamie Robot, was working on an app for parents of picky eaters, kids that are picky eaters. And she told me about this worry cycle, how the parent is concerned that their kid is not eating much, they get unhelpful information, and they apply strategies that are not effective, which makes the problem worse. And then they become more concerned, and then they try more things, and etc. etc. And I felt this was exactly how insomnia develops, and that was really interesting. It was another kind of scratching of the surface a moment where I felt like there is something more here that I don't fully understand, but all these things are somehow connected. Another moment was when my wife made me listen to this podcast. It was really about business, and the person was talking about sales, and she was talking about how you have to detach yourself from the outcome. If you really want to sell something, that makes it impossible. And I felt that was exactly like sleep. The more you want to sleep, the more insomnia you get. And another moment, the final one I want to share here, was that when I had this CBT deck, like a deck of cards based on cognitive behavioral therapy made by Seth Gillihan, and I just picked a random card and I tried to apply it to insomnia, and time after time it just this applies to insomnia, it probably applies to depression, it probably applies to anxiety as well. There was really something there that unified almost all problems and the solution as well. The problems seem to be so similar, the solutions seem to be so similar as well. Now, this was going on for a long time in my brain, and conversations with Nick Wignall, Ellen Wormter, and my wife, Jamie Robot, as well as her understanding of Brooke Castillo's teaching, all that was kind of brewing in my mind until about a week ago when I was taking a walk with my wife, and she shared with me that Brooke Castillo had talked about this kind of spectrum of human emotion, where you can have negative emotion that's probably like 50%, and the positive emotion is 50%. And the more we focus on the negative, the more those grow. And that led me to the following understanding of mental wellness issues. We have this spectrum where on the blue side, let's say, the negative side, if you will, we have sadness, we have fear, we have anxiety, and much more. Those are just some examples. And those are negative but normal emotions. And then on the positive side, we have happiness, we have excitement, we have hope. There's just some examples again of positive emotion. This spectrum from blue to yellow represents what I believe is really at baseline when you have no mental health issues, no physical problems, you're just at kind of your baseline. It represents your personality, who you are. Some of us are more likely to be a bit more sad. Some of us are more likely to, at any given point, be more happy. And that personality we have doesn't really change change much throughout our lives. But what can happen is that there can be a period of sadness. And the trigger for that sadness can be something that is unpredictable and something we cannot change. It makes us sad, and that is completely normal. And if we don't react to that, that sadness will shrink again, and we'll go back to our kind of baseline personality. But if we identify sadness in itself as a problem, and we try to figure out why we're sad, we try to find the reason, we talk to people, we investigate, etc. And we also do things to avoid the sadness, to prevent it, to have less of sadness, then it grows and grows and grows, and it enroaches upon the positive side of our emotional spectrum. It becomes a bigger and bigger problem. Now, let's say we go back to our kind of baseline personality. If we instead use anxiety as an example, we become anxious for some reason, which is a completely normal reaction. But instead of not reacting to it, whereby it would go back to baseline, we instead become really, really preoccupied. We try to find out why we're anxious, and we try to do things to become less anxious. We try to avoid anxiety. It becomes a bigger problem. And finally here, in the field that I'm mostly working, the fear of sleeplessness. So in this case, a particular fear can become really, really problematic. If we start fearing losing sleep, we try to find out why we're losing sleep, we're trying to do things to prevent losing sleep, then we have insomnia. So this model, in my mind, explains the entire spectrum of mental wellness issues: sadness, anxiety problems, panic problems, insomnia, self-loathing, fatigue, ongoing fatigue. All this can be explained by this really, really simple model that we found in the life coach space. That's where I really found it already existed. But again, it seems like in the cognitive behavioral therapy world, in the psychology world, I think there are similar understandings, but in the life coach space, this already exists, and I believe this to be true. I believe this to be a true model that explains really all problems we have in the mental wellness space. That was a real revelation to me. It just, my head felt like, a beehive at that time. But little did I know that something even more radical was about to transpire. And that happened on February 11th. It was a Tuesday night. My wife had been telling me about this particular video that Brooke Castillo, founder of the Life Coach School, had up on her webpage, and she wanted me to watch that. And that night, maybe I was excited. I don't know why, but I woke up at 2 a.m. or 2:30 a.m. or something like that, and I felt that I wasn't going to sleep more. And my wife was up too, actually, at that time. So I said, why don't we watch that video with Brooke Castillo? And we started watching the video she had wanted me to watch, which was a story of how Brooke Castillo herself had mental health problems. She went to see a psychologist, she got counseling, didn't really help it, and eventually she became a life coach, which was a really good video. But I said, let's continue on this. There were several videos, and the second one, well, that's what really blew my mind. And that's where she presented the model. This is a model that she came up with many years ago that has catapulted her to kind of the pinnacle of life coaching. And here's how it works. So there are like five parts of this model. So there are circumstances. Circumstances are those things in life that we cannot, that we have no control of, things in the past, etc. Now, those circumstances give rise to thoughts. Those thoughts lead to emotions. The emotions lead to actions, and those actions produce results. That was the simple model that she presented. When she was talking about it, I felt like, wow, there's really something there. But my first reaction was, well, this is really cool, but it doesn't really work for something more complex like insomnia. And immediately after thinking that, I thought, well, let's give it a shot. Let's see how this model works for insomnia. In the insomnia world, we have the 3P model. And I thought, why don't we try to kind of merge these models, see how that works. So I said, okay, with the 3P model, we have personality, and we have personality traits, we have precipitating events, and we have perpetuating events. Now, I immediately realized that personality traits, such as being a high achiever or type A person or worrier or something like that, that predisposes you to insomnia. And now those that personality traits, those predisposing traits, are things that are circumstance. I immediately realized that is circumstance, something you cannot change. The precipitating event, the thing that causes you to initially have sleeplessness, that is also a circumstance. It's something you cannot change. The perpetuating factors, the kind of maladaptive response, the beliefs that happen when you have trouble sleeping, the attempts at trying to solve them, and the production of more insomnia, all really fit well with the rest of the model. These were, thoughts that produced feelings. So they're thoughts like I can't sleep, that produces a feeling of hopelessness, that produces an action of trying to sleep, like taking melatonin, which produces a result that is I don't sleep better, not a good result. And then that result then triggers more unhelpful thoughts that just then cascades, and it produces this vicious circle of insomnia. And after thinking that, I was like, wow, I was blown away. I was like, this fits perfectly. And then I thought, but how about in practical reality? Can you really apply this model to a real, practical example of someone that has trouble sleeping? So I pulled up my emails, and I pulled up an email from someone that has sent me a question to my Insomnia Insight channel, and I started reading it. And I'll read it to you, and I'll share what I was thinking that night on the 11th of February. So the email went like this. Hi Daniel, my name is Megan, and I have had trouble sleeping a good portion of my life. Circumstance. I thought that is circumstance. I just found your podcast a few days ago, and I can't get enough. That is feeling. I'm discovering how messed up my ideas about sleep have been for so many years. That's a thought. Thank you for offering this free resource. That's a feeling. Here's my story and questions. I'm a middle school teacher and mother to 2 young children. That is circumstance. I've taken Lunesta on and off for the last 11 years. That is action. It's always work. That is result. Always until the first day of this year. Circumstance. The night before our first day, I couldn't sleep at all, even with taking 3 times the amount of Lunesta I normally take throughout the night. That is action and result. The next day I felt awful, and that night started getting a fever. This is feeling. I was horribly sick for the next day and had to take a few days off in school and had lingering symptoms for the next few weeks. There were circumstances again. Finally, towards the end, the question became, do you have any advice for combating this fear? That is a thought or a request for a thought or changing thought. Well, what I thought really was there, this person is looking, spelling it out, is looking for a way to change her thoughts, which can then change her feelings, her actions, and the results of those. I felt like that was the confirmation for me. In fact, I used the model on another email and had the same thing going on. It was almost freaky to me how perfectly the model worked for insomnia. And that's where I am now. I'm contemplating becoming a life coach. I'm thinking about how this model could help so many out there that have sadness issues, self-loathing issues, anxiety issues, insomnia, issues with kids that have picky eating, really any problem. And specifically to me and what I do in the insomnia realm, one of the things I thought was like, this is amazing, but does it really help that I talk about this on my Insomnia Insight channel, for example? And I thought, well, I realized that what I've been doing here is I've been working with that thought, in that thought space, that part of the model. That's where all the tips and advice and insights that I share here, that's all about like changing thoughts. That again then changes feelings, actions, and results. So does it matter if we start talking about this model? Well, what I realized then was that it does, because if I can get someone to see that the way they can get past insomnia is part of a bigger model, is part of a way of dealing with any problem you have in your life, then that person can not only get better sleep, but they can use this model for any other problem they have in their whole entire life. And that is why I felt it was so important to right off the bat, even when you probably can tell, many of my ideas that I'm sharing here are super fresh. They have not been digested yet, but I think it is super important. So I want to start talking about this now. So what I'm planning to do is I'm planning to do a series of videos where we talk about the model and applying it to insomnia. And I'm thinking long term, this is something I want to do for the rest of my life. I want to help getting this model out there for every single human being, and I think it is so desperately needed. So I want to thank you for tuning in here. Let me know what you think, and I look forward to sharing more with you as things progress and as we move forward. Until then, take it easy.